This is lesson 3.8, Create a Chain of Effects. So what is chaining? Let's explain with a couple of diagrams. Here's the first one. Recall that an effect is a graphical filter that accepts input and modifies it in some way to produce an output. Typically, one effect is applied to a node, then rendered on the screen as shown here. Now the second diagram shows that the output of one effect can be linked or chained to the input of another effect, and that effect can be chained to yet another one. Note that the first effect is applied to the node and the last effect is rendered on the screen. And as this diagram shows, you can chain as many effects as you want. The previous diagram showed you that the output of one effect can be set to the input of another effect. And when no input is specified, the node itself becomes the input. Now to chain effects, you'll need to modify the input property of the effect that you want to chain from. With an effects chain, the first effect is applied to the node and the last effect in the chain is rendered. Now it's possible to also apply transformations to nodes, so you should know that effects are applied to nodes before any transformations. For example, if you add a drop shadow effect to a rectangle and then scale up the rectangle, the drop shadow scales up too. And finally, pay attention to the order of effects chaining. If you don't chain effects in the right order, your programs may behave strangely or work incorrectly. Okay, let's show you a JavaFX program now that chains effects. This is the Chain Effects program, which demonstrates how to chain effects. Let's compile and run this program and examine its output. What you see is an image with a perspective transform effect applied here. You also see a reflection effect here. Both effects for the image are shown on a light gray background. Now what this program does is chain a reflection effect to a perspective transform effect, then apply the perspective transform effect to the image. The program shows that the perspective transform of the image has been reflected. Let's show you the JavaFX code for this program now. First, the program creates a reflection object with the default constructor. The first setter sets the reflection's fraction property to 0.8 to reflect 80% of the source. The other two setters fade out the reflection with top opacity set to 0.8 and bottom opacity set to 0.2. Next, the program creates a perspective transform object with the default constructor. These setters configure the perspective coordinates. The upper left corner is 5010 and the lower left corner is 550. The upper right corner is 450 and the lower right corner is 450. The call to set input sets the input property of the perspective transform effect to the reflection effect. Note that set effect cannot be used here because we are chaining effects and not applying an effect to a node. Next, the program creates an image view object for the JPEG file in the resources directory of the project. The call to set effect applies the perspective transform effect along with the chained reflection effect to the image view node. And finally, here is where we add the image view object to the root scene graph. Now earlier in this lesson, we emphasized that order is very important when you chain effects. To emphasize this point, let's look at another version of this program. In this program, we chain the effects differently. First, we create a perspective transform object and configure its perspective coordinates. Here, the lower left and lower right coordinates are slightly different to make this program fit into a scene that's the same size as the other program. Next, a reflection object is created and its properties are configured. Note that this setter is the opposite of what we did in the previous program. That is, set input sets the input property of the reflection effect to the perspective transform effect. And this setter is different too. Here, set effect applies the reflection effect along with the chained perspective transform effect to the image view node. Okay, so we've chained the effects, but it's the opposite of what we did before. Will it still work and give us the same result? Let's find out. When we recompile and run the program, the answer is no. You see that the reflection's perspective transform effect is incorrect. So when you chain effects, make sure you do it in the right order.